Hey, how's it going, party people? Greg Jenkins here from House Monkey Pod. And earlier today, I was answering a question for one of my OG members, shout out to Danny, about standardizing an intake process for new prospects, right? So Danny gets text messages, emails, and voicemails from potential leads, but they often have, first name and phone number, or just an email, right? Or first name, last name, and a phone number, right? But maybe not always the same set of information. And so what Danny has been doing is what many of us do, replying in the moment, responding to a text, giving them a call back. But then there's not a whole lot of systemized follow-up after that. And those leads don't always make it into the database. So Danny asked, how could I improve this process to make sure that everybody gets follow-up and no one slips between the cracks? And so here's a quick breakdown of a simple intake form that I recommended Danny could build, or you might be able to use for a similar use within your business. Take a look. There's probably a handful of ways to approach this, but let me show you what I think I would do, and maybe you can do exactly this, or you can adapt it for your own scenario. So I would just create a campaign, like a brand new campaign with an intake form that you can use. So new voicemail intake form, or new prospect intake form, something like that, right? And then you could add it to a category. If you use categories, that's optional. And I would start with an internal form. So this would be Danny's intake form, right? Something like that. And this is just going to be used inside of Keap. So there's no like design or anything that you need to do. It's just like, what fields might you collect? And I'm going to make them all optional, because you said sometimes there's an email, sometimes that there isn't one. Sometimes there's a first name, sometimes there's a last name. So I'm going to add a few other snippets as well. So let's add, I think, company, and we'll leave that as optional as well. And then I'll add phone number, something like that. And you can, of course, reorder these in whatever capacity you want. And then I'm going to do like a follow-up section here. So we will add a snippet of text that says, right, something like that. And then we would add a checkbox. So remind me to call them, right? Something like that. And then I'll do a field for like, well, when do we want to call them, right? And I don't think I have one. Oh, I do. Callback date. Perfect. So I already have one created. So again, all these fields are optional, okay? And you could add additional fields if there are notes from your conversation with them or any sort of context you want to collect, right? I would build a form like this. And then we mark it as ready. And you would construct the follow-up. So sometimes I would imagine you want nothing to happen, right? You just want to add the contact to your database. So I'm going to leave a blank sequence here with nothing in it. And the reason we need this sequence is to give us, when we give it more than one option, so this will be our call back reminder. When we give the sequence or the campaign more than one option, we get this little decision diamond, right? So now in here, we would say if the contacts, actually what we want is the form submission options, but I think I need to publish this one before that becomes available. Let's give this a quick look and see if that comes back. Yeah, form submission option, remind me to call them, is not selected. So if we don't check that box, they just go into this nothing sequence. But if we do check the box option, remind me to call them, is selected, then they'll go into this callback reminder sequence. So basically, you can fill this form out either way. And if you have checked that box, they'll go back down here. If you haven't checked that box, they'll go into the nothing sequence where, nothing happens. And then in here, we would use a field timer and we would have it set to no delay, callback date, next occurrence at 5 a.m., right? And then we would create a task to call them back. And in the body of the task, you can, call them at, you can merge in the phone number. There you go. And then type, call. You could add outcomes. I have a blog post on MonkeyPod task outcomes right there. So I have a blog post. Oh, that's a YouTube video. But either way, that walks you through how to use the different task outcomes. You can assign it to the context owner, or you can assign it just to yourself as the default. You do need to say, 1 day till due at, let's say, 4:30 p.m. Priority essential, right? So you need to fill in some of those fields. Mark this as ready. Mark the sequence as ready. And that's it, right? That's the campaign here. Now, you could put additional reminders in here, right? So if a few days goes by, right? So wait until, and this would be after, so maybe like 3 days after the callback date, right? If they're still in here, maybe you send an email to yourself, or you apply a note that reminds you about it, right? So you have a few options for like adding redundancies into this. And then of course, if that task is marked as completed, called them back, you can configure this so that it is, that's fine, so that it pulls them out of there in case you had those reminders. So this is like the general structure, but it all kind of stems back to like that intake form. Now, once you have published this campaign, the intake form is then available. So you can use that intake form here, right? In the CRM section, you could do add a contact, and there should be Danny's intake form. So you could just fill this out. And the callback date is, let's say we talked to them, or we got a voicemail today, so we want to call them back on Monday. So we set that up to Monday, and we check this box. When you click save, it's going to achieve this goal, the intake form goal. So they achieve this goal, and you see they get routed down into here, and then they're queued up on this timer until that callback date when that task will be created. Down here, on the bottom half of this contact who I just created, in the campaign section, we should see this goal was achieved. That's this goal here. So if we look at last 24 hours, you can see that goal was achieved. And then we have some items scheduled for Monday the 13th because that is when the callback date is. So June 13th, 2022. And you could do actually a time of day as well if you wanted a date and time field, but that's the general concept is now this automation is queued up to remind us, and we'll have a task created in our tasks section on that date and time that sort of keeps us accountable. I will also point out that you can set up your form so that it shows up on this list up here so that it's a little more easily accessible. And you do that in the CRM settings section. So you would go to down here. These are the quick add forms. We would select Danny's intake form and whatever other forms you wanted to be available. And then when you click save, you can see up here we'll have Danny's intake form. So this would be an easy way. Anytime you need to pop someone into your system, you can fill in whichever fields you have and then know that it's going to trigger off the automation you had set up. And you could add additional checkboxes here, right? So if you had different sections of the campaign you wanted to send them down, you could have different choices that you select from, and it fires off the corresponding automation. Maybe a quote, maybe an email sequence, maybe assigning them to a different person, right? And you actually can also set the form as the default. So Danny's intake form, save, and that way when you press this plus, it defaults to Danny's intake form. You don't have to select it from that list. Now, one kind of gotcha to be aware of is that if you don't have an email address, then it's not going to necessarily be able to duplicate check. So if you fill this form out twice for two different people, or for the same person, but you don't have an email address, it's going to create two different contacts. So that is important. If the person is already in your system, like contact A, right? If the person is already in your system, then you can fill out the form directly from the contact record, right? But if I filled it out again up here, it would create a separate contact because we don't have an email address for it to use to find and merge that info. So just something to be aware of there.
Okay, so there you have it. That is a simple use case for an internal form. It allows you to add contacts to your database using whatever information you have available. And then, of course, you could add as many optional follow-up paths as you want. And whichever box you check, the contact would wind up going into the corresponding follow-up sequences, either communicating directly with the prospect or prompting you to take whatever the next actions are that you want based on the prescribed path they wound up in. So hopefully this helps you make sure that your leads are all getting the follow-up experience that serves them best, and nobody is falling into gaps in your business. Now, if you found this useful, give me a thumbs up, a subscribe, drop a comment, or just share it with someone else that it could serve. Thanks for watching.